They thought they already knew what was going to happen that day. The cadets lined up at the range, each one carrying not just their weapon, but a sense of pride, arrogance, and competition. They had trained together, challenged each other, and built an unspoken hierarchy among themselves. And in that hierarchy, there was no place for her. The moment she arrived, whispers spread like gunfire. The cadets didn't realize that the moment they judged her, they had already lost their focus. They were measuring her by appearance, not ability, by gender, not grit. It's a common pattern. People assume capability comes wrapped in a certain image, a certain tone of voice, a certain level of confidence. But true strength rarely announces itself. It doesn't need validation or noise. It reveals itself in silence, through precision, through the ability to stay grounded when everyone else is distracted by their own ego. As she prepared her weapon, the cadets continued to talk among themselves, not even hiding their dismissive looks. They expected a mistake, something that would confirm their biases. But she moved with measured grace, her hands steady, her breathing controlled. Every movement was intentional. Every step was quiet but deliberate. She didn't need to match their swagger or prove she belonged. She was about to let skill speak louder than pride ever could. The instructor, observing from a distance, could sense the imbalance of the moment. He saw the mockery, the overconfidence, and the ignorance that often clouds judgment in young soldiers. The military teaches accuracy and endurance, but it also exposes character. And in those few seconds before the first shot, the range was not just a training ground. It was a test of perception. The cadets had already failed theirs. Underestimation is not just about doubting others. It's also about revealing your own insecurity. When you look down on someone, it's often because you need to protect your own fragile sense of superiority. The cadets' laughter wasn't strength. It was fear disguised as confidence. They didn't realize that in mocking her, they were showing weakness. A true warrior never underestimates anyone. A true leader looks beyond appearances and watches for capability, for composure, for quiet courage. The moment she raised her weapon, the air changed. The range fell silent. Even the cadets who had been smirking moments before felt an odd shift, a kind of pressure that comes when confidence meets real competence. She didn't hesitate. Her movements were fluid, sharp, and exact. Every shot landed with precision, echoing through the field like a statement that required no words. In those seconds, the underestimation dissolved into disbelief. They realized too late that what they had dismissed as weakness was, in fact, mastery. This is what underestimation does. It blinds you. It prevents you from seeing potential, from recognizing skill, from respecting effort. It narrows your view of what excellence looks like. And when you underestimate someone who has prepared harder, endured longer, and focused deeper than you have, the shock of their success hits harder than any defeat. That's what the cadets felt in those 45 seconds, the sting of realization that they had been wrong, not just about her, but about the meaning of strength itself. There is a lesson buried in every act of underestimation. It teaches humility. It reminds us that ability is not always visible at first glance, and that the loudest one in the room is rarely the most capable. The woman at the range didn't need to argue, defend, or demand respect. She earned it by doing what she was trained to do: deliver results, stay calm, and let her actions carry the message. The cadets learned more from her silence than from any lecture they'd ever received. Underestimation often comes from fear. Fear that someone might outshine you. Fear that your position might be challenged. Fear that the world doesn't revolve around your assumptions. But when you're truly confident in your own ability, you stop needing to diminish others. You start observing, learning, and appreciating what others bring to the field. The range that day became a battlefield of perception, and she conquered it without firing a shot at anyone but the target. The cadet's pride shattered quietly, replaced by awe and respect. That's the quiet danger of underestimation. It doesn't just hurt the person you doubt, it cripples your own growth. Those who underestimate others stay trapped in their illusions, while those who are underestimated keep training, keep improving, and eventually redefine what's possible. Calm under fire is a quality that separates the truly trained from the merely confident. In every high-pressure situation, there's a moment when chaos demands a reaction, and only those who have mastered their mind can control their actions. At the range that day, when the tension was thick enough to cut through, she embodied that calm. The cadets were loud, restless, and brimming with energy. They carried the kind of confidence that comes from comfort, not from challenge. But she moved differently. Every gesture was measured, every breath counted, every second deliberate. It wasn't arrogance or detachment, it was awareness. She understood that control was her greatest weapon, and losing it, even for a moment, could cost her everything. The human mind under stress is unpredictable. It seeks shortcuts, panics, and amplifies mistakes. When adrenaline surges, even the best trained hands can tremble, and precision can fade. But calmness is not the absence of fear, it is the discipline to manage it. She had learned this through countless moments of failure, repetition, and pressure. Every missed shot in training had taught her to breathe slower. Every harsh critique had trained her to listen instead of react. Every challenge had shaped her patience until it became a shield against the noise around her. Now, standing in the middle of that range, surrounded by doubt and expectation, she drew from that discipline. The cadets watching her couldn't understand it. To them, composure looked like weakness, like hesitation. They mistook silence for uncertainty because they had never faced true chaos yet. They didn't know what it meant to be tested when everything was on the line. But calmness in crisis is not born in comfort. It's forged in the moments when nothing goes right, when your instincts scream at you to rush, and you choose instead to wait. She had learned that mastery isn't about speed or strength. It's about precision guided by patience. As she took her stance, her body aligned in perfect balance, her breathing synchronized with the faint hum of the wind. The world around her seemed to fade. No voices, no judgment, no distractions. Just her weapon, and the target. The cadets might have been measuring her through competition, but she was measuring herself through focus. Calm under fire isn't just about external control, it's about internal silence. It's the ability to quiet the noise of fear, pride, and pressure until all that remains is clarity. In the military, calmness is often mistaken for passivity, but it's actually the highest form of readiness. The best soldiers don't react, they respond. They wait for the right moment, calculate the smallest details, and act when others hesitate. She had trained her mind to see beyond the present chaos. Her focus wasn't on the cadets or their laughter, but on performance. She understood that emotions cloud judgment, and judgment defines outcomes. So she shut everything out, the noise, the doubt, the assumptions, and built a fortress within her focus. The first shot echoed through the field, steady and sharp. No tremor in her hand, no flicker of hesitation. She reloaded, fired again, and again, each shot a rhythm, each breath a reset. Her calmness wasn't just visible, it was felt. The cadets fell silent, their expressions shifting from amusement to astonishment. They began to sense something they hadn't expected: control, confidence, command. Not the kind that shouts or demands, but the kind that dominates quietly. That kind of presence can't be faked. It comes only from mastery earned through struggle. Calm under fire doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from preparation. It's the reward for those who have failed enough times to know that panic never helps. She had faced pressure before, faced failure before, and that's why she didn't fear this moment. The cadets saw only the surface, the flawless execution, the steady demeanor, but underneath was a history of resilience. Every disciplined choice she made was a rejection of fear. Every breath was a message: control is power. In that brief display, she taught everyone watching that composure isn't natural, it's built. It's the product of hundreds of moments where you could lose focus but choose not to. It's about knowing when to act, when to pause, and when to let stillness do the work. True calmness doesn't come from ignoring the pressure. It comes from embracing it, from letting it sharpen you instead of shake you. She had learned to treat pressure like a test of identity, not something to fear, but something to master. What made her presence so striking wasn't her skill alone, but the peace she carried into conflict. She didn't let the situation define her reaction. She defined the situation through her reaction. The cadets, who once thought composure meant inexperience, began to realize that calmness was the strongest weapon on that range. Because when everyone else lost focus, she remained steady. When others looked for validation, she looked for alignment. And when chaos demanded panic, she offered stillness. That's how control shifts. Not with aggression, but with mastery of emotion, attention, and self. Skill over stereotype is a truth that only becomes visible when someone dares to defy expectation. From the moment she stepped onto that range, she was not seen as an equal, but as an outsider. The cadets had already formed their judgments before she even picked up her weapon. They whispered and smirked, their confidence rooted not in superiority of skill, but in the comfort of an old belief that strength has a certain face, that precision has a certain posture, that leadership belongs to a certain kind of person. What they didn't realize was that skill has no gender, no boundary, no label. It exists in those who dedicate themselves to mastery, no matter how others choose to perceive them. She had walked a longer, harder road to stand there that day. Every step had been marked by doubt, not her own, but others. The kind of doubt that comes in subtle forms: a raised eyebrow during training, a dismissive comment from an instructor, the quiet belief that she couldn't match the standards set by those before her. But instead of letting that doubt harden her into anger, she used it as fuel. Every criticism became motivation. Every assumption became a target. While others trained to compete, she trained to prove that skill alone would speak, even when no one wanted to listen. The cadets surrounding her had been raised in a culture of comparison. They measured worth by noise, by dominance, by tradition. But she understood something deeper. That true mastery doesn't demand validation. It doesn't need to announce itself. It reveals itself in the moments when results silence every assumption. As she prepared her stance, it wasn't rebellion she carried in her chest. It was purpose. She wasn't there to prove she belonged. She was there because she had earned it. The first few moments on the range were filled with tension. The cadets had dismissed her presence, assuming she would falter under the pressure. Their arrogance was born of familiarity. They had seen countless trainees crumble when tested under scrutiny. But as she raised her weapon, her form precise, her focus unbroken, something shifted. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. The steadiness in her movements spoke of countless hours of unseen labor, the kind that doesn't seek attention but demands respect. Her confidence came not from words, but from repetition, from discipline, from the quiet sacrifices no one applauds. When the first shot cracked through the silence, the sound carried more than just the force of a bullet. It carried proof. The target bore witness to something undeniable: performance beyond prejudice. Each shot followed with mechanical consistency, a demonstration of skill that no stereotype could argue with. The cadets, who moments ago had been sure of their superiority, began to watch differently. Their expressions shifted from casual dismissal to uneasy realization. What they were seeing wasn't luck or defiance. It was mastery. Stereotypes thrive in ignorance. They survive only as long as they're unchallenged. But skill is the ultimate counterforce. It doesn't debate or persuade, it dismantles. It breaks through the thickest walls of bias with results that cannot be denied. That's what she did that day. Without confrontation, without anger, she stood as living proof that performance transcends perception. Each precise movement, each calculated breath, was a message that said more than words ever could. Ability has no label. There's a quiet kind of power that comes from being underestimated and still performing beyond expectation. It teaches resilience of a different kind, the kind that doesn't seek revenge but justice through excellence. She had learned to let her work speak in places where her voice wasn't heard. She had learned to let consistency build credibility, even in the face of rejection. It's a lonely path, but it's also the most transformative. Because when skill becomes your language, no stereotype can silence it. The cadets watching her began to shift in posture, their laughter fading into reflection. They started noticing the small details they had overlooked, the precision in her stance, the rhythm of her shots, the unbroken calm between each movement. They began to understand what true skill looks like, effortless not because it's easy, but because it's earned. For the first time, they saw a mirror reflecting their own bias, and the image wasn't flattering. Skill doesn't belong to one kind of person. It belongs to those who stay when others quit, who practice when others talk, who commit when others doubt. She was a reminder that excellence doesn't fit into categories, it destroys them. Her performance on that range wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving what's possible when discipline outlasts discrimination. The cadets saw it happen in real time, a stereotype collapsing under the weight of evidence. When the final shot echoed, silence followed, not the silence of discomfort, but of respect, the kind that comes when the truth becomes impossible to ignore. She had done more than outperform them. She had dismantled a mindset. What began as a contest of skill became a revelation about perception. They had surrounded her believing they held the advantage. But in those 45 seconds, she had turned their assumptions into lessons. And as the colonel watched from above, even he saw it, that the range had become more than a test of aim. It had become a turning point where skill proved itself stronger than stereotype. The colonel had seen countless drills, countless cadets, countless displays of discipline and defiance over his years in command. But that day, what he witnessed at the range forced him to look closer than he had in a long time. It started as a routine exercise for cadets, one unexpected participant, and an instructor marking scores. He wasn't expecting anything unusual, just another training session to evaluate coordination and control. Yet as soon as she took her position, something about the atmosphere changed. The usual chatter among the cadets faded into murmurs. Their confidence was loud, but it was not grounded in awareness. The colonel could sense it even from the observation tower, that quiet arrogance that often fills young soldiers before they truly understand what discipline means. When the exercise began, the difference in attitude between her and the others was immediate. The cadets approached the challenge with noise, energy, and haste, eager to display dominance. She approached it with silence. Her movements were deliberate, her breathing even, her timing flawless. It wasn't defiance, it wasn't fear, it was control. From the tower, the colonel's trained eyes followed every motion. He had seen skilled marksmen before, but what caught his attention wasn't just accuracy, it was composure. She wasn't reacting to pressure, she was shaping it. As the seconds ticked away, the range became a canvas of contrast. The cadets' shots were loud but inconsistent, their rhythm broken by bursts of adrenaline and ego. She, on the other hand, fired with precision that seemed almost mechanical, but not cold. There was emotion in her steadiness, a purpose that went beyond the target. Each shot landed exactly where it needed to, and with each one, the colonel felt something rare, respect forming in real time. He leaned forward, his expression tightening as he realized he wasn't just witnessing skill. He was witnessing leadership in its purest form. True leadership doesn't always come from authority or rank. It comes from example. It's earned through discipline, resilience, and the ability to remain unshaken under scrutiny. The colonel understood this better than anyone, but seeing it demonstrated so clearly from someone so underestimated stirred something in him. The cadets were still trying to prove themselves to each other. She was proving something to herself. She wasn't seeking validation. She was simply executing excellence. And that distinction was everything. The moment stretched longer than expected. Time seemed to slow as the difference in performance became undeniable. The instructor marking the scores exchanged uncertain glances with his team. The cadets, once smug and confident, began to falter. Their rhythm broke, their hands unsteady, their focus scattered. They had underestimated her, and now they were watching the result of that mistake unfold. From his elevated view, the colonel could almost feel the shift in energy. The range that had been filled with arrogance moments ago was now filled with silence and the humbling weight of realization. 45 seconds. That was all it took. In less than a minute, the entire dynamic changed. The colonel watched as she finished her sequence, lowered her weapon, and stepped back without expression. She didn't celebrate. She didn't seek acknowledgement. That quiet professionalism spoke louder than any declaration could. The cadets, still processing what had just happened, looked to the colonel instinctively, as if waiting for him to reaffirm what they had believed all along. But he didn't. He stayed still, studying the range, studying her, studying the lesson that had just been delivered without a single word. Leadership isn't always about giving orders. Sometimes, it's about recognizing when the situation itself gives one for you. The colonel felt that in his bones. The decision formed not out of impulse, but from clarity. What he saw wasn't just performance. It was a statement about merit, equality, and the integrity of the system he commanded. If he ignored what he had just witnessed, he'd be betraying the very principles of the uniform he wore. Authority meant nothing if it couldn't recognize excellence, no matter where it came from. As he reached for the microphone, the range was still. The cadets stood tense, unsure. The instructors waited. Even the wind seemed to pause. They had learned something that day no training manual could teach, that leadership recognizes truth, even when it disrupts comfort. The colonel's order was more than instruction. It was a reminder that the purpose of command isn't to preserve hierarchy, but to elevate competence. He watched her for a moment longer before turning away, his expression thoughtful. He had seen something that reaffirmed his belief in why they trained, why they served, and what it truly meant to lead. The sound of her shots still echoed faintly in the distance, not as noise, but as proof. The colonel didn't need to say much more. The order he gave spoke for itself, and its impact would ripple far beyond that single day at the range. Respect is not something that can be demanded or granted by position. It's something that must be earned through action, consistency, and integrity. That day at the range, every unspoken bias, every whispered doubt, every dismissive look from the cadets was built upon the assumption that respect was already theirs, a right that came with their uniform, their training, their gender. They didn't realize that respect, like trust, can only be built on proof. It cannot be inherited or assumed. It must be earned. And in those 45 seconds, she earned it in a way that none of them could deny. At the start, the atmosphere was casual but charged. The cadets were confident, almost careless, treating the exercise like another opportunity to prove dominance. They were young, eager, and proud, not bad qualities, but dangerous when left unchecked. They mistook confidence for superiority. They believed experience came automatically with status. When she walked in, quiet and focused, their smirks revealed everything. They didn't need to say it aloud. Their body language did it for them. In their eyes, she was already beneath them. Respect wasn't even on the table, only ridicule. But she understood something they didn't. Respect isn't given. It's built through composure and performance. She didn't waste time reacting to their doubt. She had faced it before. She had walked through enough rooms where her presence was questioned, enough training sessions where her efforts were overlooked, to know that the only thing that could shift perception was excellence. She didn't need to speak to prove her worth. She needed to act. So while they laughed and whispered, she prepared, not to compete with them, but to show them what discipline truly looked like. When the drill began, everything that followed spoke a language the cadets could finally understand. Results. Her first shot wasn't just accurate, it was decisive. It broke through the haze of mockery and replaced it with silence. One after another, her rounds landed cleanly, each one challenging the narrative they had built about her. She didn't flinch, didn't gloat, didn't even glance at them. Every movement she made was grounded in focus. That restraint, that mastery of self, was what began to command their respect. Not fear, not intimidation, respect. Respect doesn't come from loud declarations or forced authority. It grows in moments of undeniable truth. As the seconds passed, the cadets' expressions shifted from amusement to uncertainty, then to something closer to awe. Their laughter died out completely. They began to watch differently, not as competitors, but as students witnessing something that defied their expectations. Her calmness under pressure, her precision, her control, it all spoke volumes. For the first time, They saw the difference between confidence and competence. Confidence fills the room. Competence controls it. The colonel, observing from the tower, noticed the same transformation. He saw how quickly perception could change when confronted with excellence. Respect, he knew, was a fragile thing, easily broken by ego, but unshakable when earned through ability. As she finished the drill, the entire range seemed to hold its breath. The cadets lowered their weapons, their pride dismantled, their silence louder than any applause. They had walked in believing they were there to test her. They walked out realizing she had tested them. True respect is not built in comfort. It's forged in challenge. It emerges when one person stands firm against judgment and lets their performance speak louder than prejudice. She didn't ask for approval because she knew it wasn't hers to request. She created it, moment by moment, through the steadiness of her focus and the integrity of her effort. Every bullet that found its mark chipped away at the arrogance that surrounded her. Every second she remained composed deepened the lesson she was teaching, that respect cannot be faked and it cannot be forced. The cadets' pride wasn't destroyed that day, it was reshaped. They began to understand that respect is not about who you are, but how you carry yourself when no one believes in you. They had mocked her silence, but now they saw it for what it was, confidence built on experience, not noise. Her calmness under their scrutiny showed them that power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it moves quietly, waiting for the right moment to make its point. When the drill ended, she didn't celebrate or even look for acknowledgement. She simply disarmed her weapon and stepped back, her demeanor unchanged. That lack of need for recognition was what sealed their respect completely. Because true strength doesn't seek validation, it creates it. The colonel could see the shift in the room, the humbled expressions, the subdued posture of the cadets, the newfound awareness settling into their minds. What had started as a routine exercise became a lesson in humility. Respect isn't tied to rank, reputation, or rhetoric. It belongs to those who deliver when it matters, who maintain composure under pressure, who prove through consistency that they deserve it. She had done all of that without a single word. And in doing so, she reminded everyone there, from the colonel to the youngest cadet, that respect, once earned through excellence, can never be taken away. Every range, every battlefield, every training ground has moments that define more than skill, they define legacy. That day, what happened in those 45 seconds didn't end when the shooting stopped. It lived on in every mind that had witnessed it. The cadets would go back to their quarters quieter than usual. The colonel would replay what he saw in his mind, understanding that something more important than a shooting score had just taken place. And she, the woman who had been doubted before she even took her stance, would carry that moment not as a victory, but as a reminder. That one act of excellence can shift an entire system's perspective. Legacies aren't built through speeches or recognition. They are built through moments that challenge perception and force change. Her legacy didn't begin at that range. It was formed long before, in the endless hours of preparation, in the nights spent training when no one was watching, in the resilience she built every time she was told she couldn't. But that range became the turning point where all of it crystallized into something undeniable. She hadn't just hit her targets. She had shattered the invisible barriers that defined what people expected from her. For the first time, the cadets and even the colonel saw that leadership and capability didn't have a face, a gender, or a rank. They had a standard. The story of that day would spread, quietly at first. One cadet would tell another how she changed the atmosphere of the range without saying a word. The instructors would mention her performance during briefings, not as a token example, but as a benchmark. Her calmness, her focus, her refusal to be swayed by doubt would be spoken of as lessons in composure. That's how legacies form, not through attention-seeking, but through authenticity that others can't forget. Every organization, every team, every command structure thrives on examples. People don't remember lectures. They remember moments that make them feel something. That day at the range made everyone feel something profound, a sense of respect, a shift in belief, a humbling realization that capability cannot be judged until it's witnessed. The cadets who had surrounded her began to carry that understanding forward. They approached their training differently, spoke differently, thought differently. Their idea of what it meant to be strong evolved, shaped by one moment that exposed their own limitations. For the colonel, the legacy was equally personal. Leadership comes with responsibility, not just to command, but to recognize. His decision that day wasn't merely about acknowledging skill. It was about setting a precedent. He understood that if the military or any institution built on hierarchy and tradition was to evolve, it needed leaders willing to see beyond bias. The order he gave wasn't just procedural, it was symbolic. It told everyone under his command that recognition must follow performance, not perception. That lesson would ripple outward, shaping how future exercises were conducted, how cadets were evaluated, and how merit was defined. She didn't set out to create that kind of impact. That's what made it powerful. True legacy is never built from the desire to be remembered. It's built from the refusal to compromise excellence, even when no one expects it. Her actions that day weren't for approval. They were for the standard she had set for herself. But when standards like that are lived consistently, they inevitably influence others. Those who watched her perform would remember not just her skill, but her composure. Not just her results, but her restraint. The kind of influence that lasts is quiet, but it changes the culture from within. Weeks later, when new cadets arrived at the range, the story of that day had already become a reference point. It was told as a lesson in focus, humility, and perseverance. Her name wasn't always mentioned. Sometimes it didn't need to be. What mattered was the message that came with it. Never assume, never dismiss, and never let bias guide your judgment. Her legacy lived not as a memory, but as a mindset. In time, the colonel would see other cadets face similar challenges, moments of doubt, competition, and pride. But he noticed something different in how they handled it. They waited before judging, observed before reacting, respected before assuming. The echo of that day lingered in their behavior. Leadership wasn't just taught through orders anymore. It was modeled through the silent influence of what she had done. The legacy of that moment wasn't about one woman or one victory. It was about transformation, the kind that happens when truth cuts through assumption. It was about reminding everyone that excellence doesn't just change outcomes, it changes culture. The range would see many more drills, many more cadets, but that particular day would stand apart as the one where a single act of precision became a symbol of progress. Her calm, her control, her unshakable belief in preparation over perception became part of the institution's memory, woven quietly into its fabric, ensuring that those who came after would know that real